Michelle Murphy, Research and Policy Analyst at Social Justice Ireland, discusses the issue of housing. What philosophy underpins Social Justice Ireland's understanding of housing?
Our understanding of housing is underpinned by the philosophy that sees a house as a home. So the emphasis is on a house as shelter, a place to stay, a place to build a base, and where you participate in the community. So in terms of this, we see housing as a fundamental social requirement in the same way that health and education are seen as fundamental social requirements.
And how is this different from the philosophy underpinning government policy?
Well, government policy previously and at present is still underpinned by the philosophy that housing is a commodity. So in this way, if housing is viewed as a commodity, it means that it's a market item and there's very limited state intervention in terms of either facilitating house building, and what you do is encourage private provision for housing. So in this way, someone who has the means and the income to buy a house and then sell it to make a speculative profit, they increase their resources. But this excludes people based on their ability to pay. And what you're doing is generating a housing system based on profit. And at the same time, it doesn't do anything to address the inequalities within the system and segregation, because if your ability to get a house is based on your resources and your ability to pay, then if you do not have those resources to purchase a house, then you will remain at the bottom of the market, or you will have a very restricted choice in the type of house that you have or the area that you want to live in. So that would be the philosophy that has underpinned the approach to housing over the past 10, 20 years in Ireland, whereas our philosophy is that a house should be viewed as a home. It's a social requirement. It's where you can build a base, where you can interact with your community. So we don't see housing as a commodity, and we don't support the view that a house should be just viewed as a commodity or an item to be bought and sold on the market to generate income for people who have resources in the first place.
And what are the main challenges in relation to social housing provision?
There are huge challenges in terms of social housing provision in Ireland. You have over 90,000 households on waiting lists for social housing, and over between a third and 40% of those households have children in them, which is a huge problem because the links between poor health, poor educational attainment, less life opportunities, and poor housing is well documented both nationally and internationally. The challenge in relation to social housing provision is that there is no investment in social housing presently. The capital budget for social housing has been cut year on year, and in 2013 just over 500 housing units were built. 500 new housing units were built to deal, to provide some social housing. That's 500 units to deal with over 90,000 households. It's completely insufficient. So the main challenge is that there is no investment, that presently and previously governments have relied on the market to provide housing for people in housing need, but this does not work because, as we can see now, market prices in certain areas are rising and they're pricing people out of the market. So the market cannot provide the social housing needed for all the people on the housing waiting list, and neither can the housing associations. Even if they were to double the amount of social housing they provide, this is the cooperatives and the national housing associations, they still would not be able to deal with the scale of the problem that we have in Ireland at the moment.
And finally, what needs to be done to ensure people have access to appropriate accommodation?
Well, first of all, we need to understand and recognise that housing is a social requirement and a house should be viewed as a home. We need an integrated housing strategy for Ireland so that we can ensure that everybody has access to appropriate accommodation. This includes people with disabilities, travellers, people with children, older people, single people, couples, families. So we need a strategy in order to do this. We also clearly we need to invest, because if we don't invest in social housing and capital building, then we still will not be able to address the problem of social housing shortage that we have at the moment. And we should also consider the creation of a national housing agency to oversee the entire the entirety of housing policy, going from an integrated housing strategy through building social housing, to look at a homelessness strategy, to deal with all the different strands of housing provision.